specialist biologist with the Ministry of the Environment Dorset Research Centre. He has three degrees from Guelph, Lakehead, and York University, which is a PhD. Recently received the Zayed International Prize for Environmental Science for the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment, and is currently president of the Zoological Society of Canada, I believe. He's going to be speaking on benthic invertebrate monitoring in Muskoka.
I am vice president of the Society of Canadian Limnologists, not the Zoological Society. So I just don't want to get too many people confused. So thanks again. Thanks for inviting me, and thank you very much to all of you for attending, especially on an evening as warm as it is today. This must be all the people that have no air conditioning in their house. So I'm going to spend my next 20 minutes or so talking to you about benthic invertebrate monitoring in Muskoka, and I'll be categorizing the insights and opportunities that are available in that area of research. And my talk really has four components that are here basically in the title. I'll first introduce you to what benthic invertebrates are, for those of you that don't know, and what role they play in lakes. We'll talk about a little bit about the utility of monitoring as a tool for management, understanding, prediction, and a number of other things. And of course, the focus will be here. And we'll be looking at, again, both the insights and opportunities that we can gain from that type of monitoring. So I'm at the Dorset Environmental Science Centre. Maybe I'll just move that over a little bit. It's a little bright in here, but this little white blob is the Dorset Environmental Science Centre. This is Highway 117 as it comes into Dorset, and so we're just off the road on Paine Lake. And we've been there for quite a while. We serve as the Ministry of the Environment's Centre for Scientific Expertise on Environmental Issues Affecting Ontario Inland Lakes. Base most of our research here in Muskoka, but go further afield into Lake of the Woods and Lake Simcoe and other areas, the far north included. Desk was established in 1975. Largely to develop a lakeshore capacity model to look at the effects of phosphorus loading to ecosystems in this area. But then acid rain early in the 80s took over as the focal point of the research for the center. And in 1988, some of the biomonitoring efforts that were started in 1975 were expanded from looking in the middle of lakes, basically to the shores of lakes and streams, and including benthos and crayfish for information on assessing impact and recovery. And today, it's expanded much beyond that capacity, and Norm will give you a bit of flavor of where some of those directions have taken us. But many different initiatives are going on, and if you're ever down 117 on the way to Dorset, you should stop in. So the major scientific focus, or the major monitoring focus, I guess, is the long-term monitoring of small headwater lakes and streams in the area. And back in the mid-70s, when it started up, as I mentioned, there were 9 basins in 8 lakes that were part of the bulk of the data collection, and that's continued to the present day. The expansion was into 20 different lakes and 15 streams to get a better idea of what the biota was doing. And we regard these systems as largely early warning ecosystems that can help us to understand changes, help us to detect the changes that are occurring, both in water quantity and quality, as well as lake health in response to a number of different stressors. So what are benthic macroinvertebrates? you probably encounter them every day, and maybe you just don't know them as such. So here are two I encountered just this past week, on Monday of this week, when we were sampling in Algonquin Park. This is a not rusty crayfish, but this is a Canberra's crayfish that we caught, and here's almost the same size, a large dragonfly nymph that also crawled into the trap as a result of an overnight set. And so these were my most recent encounters, but they really encompass a large range of different aquatic bugs, and most of them insects. Here's a Hexagenia larva. So most of what we call benthic macroinvertebrates are larvae of adult forms of insects. And so this is a burrowing mayfly, and it's responsible, this is the hatch of that mayfly from the water that we get every year on many lakes. North Bay is especially famous for its huge populations of mayfly that hatch from nipissing. Here's a megalopteran. The adult can grow up to 10 centimeters long, so it's great fish food. What it does is lay its eggs on overhanging vegetation, so it doesn't become prey as an adult, and the eggs fall into the water and start to develop as aquatic larvae again. This is another egg from the stonefly. And stoneflies often inhabit really nice, cool, clear streams where there's lots of dissolved oxygen. Whoops, pardon me. And so they're good indicators of water quality. This egg is covered in spines and mucus, and so it adheres to the bottom of those streams. So some really interesting adaptations for these creatures as they live in aquatic environments. Here are a group of caddisflies. And I'm sure you've seen these. Well, maybe you haven't seen these, but hopefully you've seen these because they're beautiful. They make these really elegant cases out of bits of detritus or bits of sand, in this case. And they crawl around the bottom of lakes and streams, doing many different things. There are groups that spin webs in streams, basically like spiders, to capture their prey as it floats down with the stream flow. There are more free-living ones. A really interesting group of benthic macroinvertebrates. And here's a bit of a turn of the tables. These are great, as I mentioned earlier, they're great bundles of energy for fish to chew on. And here's a predaceous diving beetle with a larval northern pike in its jaws. So a bit of retribution. So one of the other components of the Dorset site that's focused on benthic biomonitoring, and one that you may have heard of before, is the Ontario Benthic Biomonitoring Network. And it began in 2003. The distribution of sites is shown on this map here. There are over 1,000 sites now that are being sampled as part of this network. The partners that are involved in this are conservation authorities, mining industries, universities, national parks, and a host of volunteers as well. And again, it's structured along the same lines as some of the research that I'll be presenting. Look at aquatic ecosystem conditions in lakes, streams, and wetlands, using macroinvertebrates as indicators. But one thing we'll come back to later is that right now this mostly is occurring in streams. And the work I'll be presenting is mostly on lakes. So why do we want to monitor anything for that matter, not just lakes, but what use is all this long-term data that we're collecting? So I'll argue that there's three main foci to our ability or our need to monitor. The first one is detecting the effects of disturbances, and that's kind of a no-brainer. You can look at trends as part of that, and you can estimate baselines that then you can compare non-impacted and impacted sites to. And you can also use them to set restoration endpoints. If you have an impacted site, where does it have to go back to be a functioning system again? Another way we can use monitoring, long-term monitoring data is to predict future threats to diversity and ecosystem function. And we can do this by a number of techniques. Modeling is one, and I won't talk about that. But what is really important is that we detect these threats early, and so that is a great asset when you have long-term monitoring data at hand. And we also want to just use those data to improve our understanding of ecosystem change. And as a geeky scientist, I might want to test some ecological theory with those data as well. So that's always fun for a scientist, but maybe not so fun for you to hear about. So I'm going to leave this part out of the talk largely. But we'll look at we'll look at a few examples of detecting change and predicting possible impacts. And this is my favorite plot of just to sort of illustrate a little more the use of long-term monitoring data for detecting, predicting, and understanding aquatic ecosystems. So this was in a former life as a research scientist with the University of Wisconsin in Madison, and I was with a group that was collecting long-term ecological research data on Trout Lake in Wisconsin, and there are two lines on this graph. The blue one is for macrophytes or aquatic plants in that lake that we surveyed annually, and the red one is for an invasive crayfish that came into the lake right around 1981. That was the first occurrence that we noted, and this is just time on this axis, and this is the how many plants are in the lake and how many rusty crayfish are in the lake. So if we had stopped studying the lake, say in 1988, I think that might be, which is 7-8 years after the invasion, we probably would have concluded that there's really no, given the fluctuations in the plant community, it's not much of an effect of rusty crayfish at all. And maybe, if you ignore this data point, rusty crayfish are actually good for aquatic plants. And that's after 8 years, almost a decade of monitoring. But what we can see here, rusty crayfish are building up in its biomass. And after over 20 years, we get a much different story. Basically, we've almost eliminated aquatic plant habitat in the lake, and we've got enormous numbers of rusty crayfish. So, and this has also changed the structure of the fish community, because those aquatic plants act as refuge areas for small fish and feeding areas for large fish. So it's, and a decade here is really probably twice the length of any grant that a university professor gets to do this kind of research. So it's a real key for our understanding of long-term change in systems, and we really don't get a good idea of what's going on unless we have that perspective as well.